On this Monday night, Britain moves on to its third Prime Minister this year. What Rishi Sunak will bring to 10 Downing Street.
I am humbled and honoured.
And the huge challenges he's taking on. Deep disappointment, reaction in a BC Indigenous community after two police officers who made this wrongful arrest failed to show up for an apology ceremony. New details about the case of two Canadian businessmen kidnapped in the Philippines and then killed. A global news investigation into those responsible. And smashing success.
Fantastic.
Canada's Felix AugerAliassime serves up another championship.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After 3 months of extraordinary political chaos, Britain is about to get another new Conservative Prime Minister. And in the end, it was no contest. Rishi Sunak, who lost out to Liz Truss in September, was the only candidate to get enough support from Tory MPs this time. He's scheduled to meet King Charles tomorrow and be asked to form a government.
I pledge that I will serve you with integrity and humility, and I will work day in, day out to deliver for the British people.
He is the third Tory leader in 7 weeks and, like Liz Truss, will take charge of the country without going to the electorate. He's making history, the first person of colour to become British Prime Minister and one of the youngest to ever take on the job. The scale of the challenge he faces, shoring up an economy headed for recession, is considerable. Eric Sorensen has our top story tonight.
The moment lacked the theatrics of another leadership fight.
I can confirm that we have received one valid nomination.
That one was Rishi Sunak, who alone had enough support from MPs to avert a wider Conservative vote. Backbenchers greeted him with relief as much as enthusiasm in a party and country bitterly divided.
We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
It will not be easy. Sunak takes over with the UK in severe economic decline and with little confidence in the Tory party.
It has been a circus, I'm afraid, and what can you say? It's not edifying.
There should be a new leader.
The dizzying spectacle of Boris Johnson's political exit, followed in a flash by his successor, Liz Truss,
I am resigning.
has left Sunak with a mess to clean up. The Labour Party wants an election right away.
There is no mandate now. The Conservatives have completely broken their promises.
But Sunak told his MPs he won't put the party's governing majority at risk at the worst possible time politically. He can govern for 2 years.
Calling an election would be electoral suicide. The message they want to send is that the Conservative Party are now committed to a stable and effective government in a period of considerable challenges for the UK.
The markets rebounded after the news broke. In London's financial district, hope that Sunak can steady the ship of state.
He's the guy who knows the market, who knows the economy better than his predecessor.
Hopefully he'll settle things down. I think he's got a very good reputation preceding him.
Rishi Sunak represents a cultural breakthrough for the nation, the first British Asian, first Hindu leader. His wife's wealth and tax payments were controversial.
Keep going, that's it, you got it.
And what's on tap for a party riven by infighting? Sunak opposed his predecessor's tax cuts.
Here he comes.
But the first person of colour to move into 10 Downing Street is itself historic.
The fact that this is possible now in 2022 is a new thing in British politics that wouldn't have been the case even 10 years ago.
Earlier this year, the Prince of Wales met the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Tomorrow, they will meet again with new titles as King Charles appoints his first Prime Minister. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Rishi Sunak is 42. He will be the youngest British Prime Minister in more than 200 years. Born in the UK, he's the son of immigrants of Indian origin. Educated at Oxford and Stanford, he was in business and finance before politics. He once worked for Goldman Sachs. Sunak was first elected in 2015. 5 years later, he was appointed Chancellor or Finance Minister. He quit in July after losing confidence in Boris Johnson's ability to govern, and he led the revolt against Johnson and came second to Liz Truss in the Conservative leadership race in September. Now to Ontario. Premier Doug Ford and Ontario's former Solicitor General are being compelled to testify at the inquiry into the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act after legal counsel for the commission says they declined invitations to appear voluntarily. The person giving evidence today was the interim chief of the Ottawa police force. The force has been heavily criticized for not doing enough to control the protests last winter. Stuart Bell says the lessons his force learned have already paid off. Our chief political correspondent David Akin has the story.
Well, Donna, until the Freedom Convoy showed up, the standard playbook for police forces across the country preparing to deal with demonstrations had two objectives. One, protect charter rights to peaceful protests, and two, guarantee the safety of participants and police. Perhaps incredibly, protecting a community from the harm those protests might do was never an explicit objective in Ottawa police planning.
But we had never taken the view of making sure that the community and the surrounding areas, we were as responsive to their needs.
That has now changed.
But we need to make sure that we bring the community impact to the front of everything we do, because it was the area that was most violated during this event.
And so, several weeks after the Freedom Convoy left, and a new convoy dubbed Rolling Thunder showed up in the nation's capital, Stuart Bell, now the interim chief, let them roll up, but then made sure they rolled right away.
But we used our experience to apply towards that intelligence and created a deployment model that actually ultimately did, I believe, prevent a subsequent occupation to our streets.
As to the central question of this commission, was the invocation of the Emergencies Act justified? The Ontario Provincial Police testified last week it was not. But Bell is the second senior Ottawa police officer to testify otherwise. The powers granted under the Federal Emergency Declaration were significantly beneficial in ending the occupation, Bell said. Meanwhile, the Commission has issued subpoenas to Ontario Premier Doug Ford and his Solicitor General at the time of the convoy, Sylvia Jones. The Commission believes both have evidence it would like to have for its deliberations. Ford and Jones, though, say they will fight that subpoena in court. Donna.
More to come on that. David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks. Well, two Vancouver police officers who handcuffed an Indigenous man and his granddaughter after they tried to open a bank account have failed to show up at a pre-planned apology ceremony at a BC Indigenous community. Nearly 3 years ago, the officers were briefly suspended and ordered to take cultural sensitivity training for their part in the wrongful arrests, and they were ordered to apologize. Well, that ceremony, planned more than a month ago, was supposed to take place on the Heiltsuk Nation in Bella Bella on BC's coast, more than 1,000 kilometers northwest of Vancouver. Neetu Garcha is there tonight. Neetu, do we know why the officers didn't show up?
Well, Donna, the nation's chief says they still don't know why those officers decided not to show up, and they only confirmed that they wouldn't be here after the plane touched down here in Bella Bella this afternoon. This was meant to be a traditional apology ceremony. Those officers were expected to attend and issue a verbal apology, and their absence here today, Maxwell Johnson says, is hurtful and disrespectful. Members of the Vancouver Police Board and Department arriving at the small airport in Bella Bella, BC Monday afternoon for a big moment in a high-profile case of discrimination. They've traveled to the remote community, which is home to Maxwell Johnson and his granddaughter, Tori Ann. The pair was wrongfully arrested outside a Vancouver branch after trying to open a bank account. For nearly 3 years, they've been awaiting an apology from the arresting officers.
It has been confirmed that they did not make their way up here today for the apology ceremony. When a colonial institution seeks to reconcile and to begin reconciliation together, it is a prerequisite that they show respect for our customs and engage directly with our communities.
When we do a ceremony, they got to be here in order for it to be finished. So having them not here, it's like a roadblock to us now.
Tori Ann was just 12 years old when the December 2019 incident happened. A bank staff member suspected them of presenting fraudulent Indigenous status cards and called 911. According to a discipline decision, Constable Canon Wong and Mitchel Tong recklessly used unnecessary force, committed professional misconduct, and assumed fraud without sufficient information. A groundbreaking settlement agreement announced last month includes $100,000 in funding to Heiltsuk Nation's Restorative Justice Department.
It would have been such an honor to have those police officers here to see this house and to see what we do and how we carry on our culture.
Monday's ceremony is also part of the conditions of two separate human rights complaint settlements with the bank and police board, as this case continues to spark national conversations on racial profiling and changes in handcuffing policies. Now, Donna, at the last second, the nation turned what was meant to be an apology ceremony into what it calls an uplifting ceremony for Maxwell Johnson and his granddaughter, Tori Ann. They say that the Vancouver Police Department has a responsibility to explain why those officers didn't attend. We have yet to hear an explanation from the department, but in a statement, the Vancouver Police Board says it is the respondent on the human rights case, not the individual officers, adding that it is committed to authentic healing and reconciliation. Donna?
Okay, Neetu Garcha in Bella Bella, BC. Thank you. Canada's Competition Bureau is launching an investigation into the country's grocery industry. The watchdog will examine to what extent the concentrated ownership in the sector is playing a role in rising food costs. Members of the House of Commons have voted to investigate food prices and tackle what it calls corporate greed in the grocery sector. Last month, Canadian grocery prices rose at the fastest pace in more than 40 years. The board's recommendations are not expected until June. Record-breaking early voting in a battleground. Coming up, why the midterm election in Georgia is drawing so much attention. American voters are just 15 days away from midterm elections, always a test of whoever is in the White House. The race for the Senate seat in Georgia has become one of the closest this time and most watched contests in the country. Republican Herschel Walker has been plagued by a string of scandals and accusations of domestic violence. As Jackson Protzko reports, the country is so divided, so flooded with misinformation that some voters seem to be willing to overlook even the most troubling allegations.
Georgia voters are fed up and fired up.
I use this method. I get in, I pray, and I do. And I feel that I voted right.
Early voting in the state has shattered records, fueled by a Senate race that is both a dead heat and the talk of the entire country.
It's which one's qualified to do the job.
But either way, everybody should vote.
Yeah.
In the race between Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker,
Georgia is my family. The United States is my family.
Walker has become the star attraction for all the wrong reasons. The former NFL running back has been plagued by accusations from his own family.
He has 4 kids, 4 different women, wasn't in the house raising one of them.
He's accused of paying for an abortion despite campaigning on anti-abortion views.
On abortion, I'm a Christian. I believe in life.
And exaggerating his role in law enforcement after repeatedly flashing an honorary sheriff's badge.
I voted for Herschel. I don't know that he's the greatest person to be in there, but he's absolutely better than Warnock.
Herschel Walker is a Georgia sweetheart, right? He is loved by Georgians.
Experts warn such is American politics in 2022, where highly partisan voters make even the most troubled candidates electable.
GOP enthusiasts believe that he will vote the way they want and, support the kinds of conservative legislation that they're interested in.
The Georgia Senate race has drawn national attention because the winner of this single seat could determine whether Democrats or Republicans hold the balance of power back in Washington. The race is so close that the winner may not be decided until after a special runoff vote in December.
Thank you.
Back at the polls, Georgians are not only divided, they're frustrated at the lack of substance in this race.
People are just going to vote for the candidate that represents their party regardless of what they do or who they are.
A worrying sign of how party loyalty may be the biggest issue in a state that could decide so much for the nation. Jackson Protzko, Global News, Atlanta.
Russia claims it has information Ukraine is planning to detonate a so-called dirty bomb.
запустить в мире мощную антироссийскую кампанию.
The dirty bomb is one made of explosives laced with nuclear material. Russia says Ukraine is in the final stages of developing one, but provided no evidence. Ukraine and its Western allies reject the allegation and accuse Russia of using the rhetoric as a pretext to escalate the war. 2 Chinese intelligence officers have been charged in the U.S., accused of trying to obstruct a criminal investigation into the telecom giant Huawei. The U.S. Department of Justice alleges the pair bribed a U.S. law enforcement employee for information about an ongoing investigation into Huawei. That informant was working as a double agent for the FBI. Huawei is the focus of multiple investigations over the theft of technology and violations of international sanctions. Washington has long accused Beijing of meddling in U.S. politics and attempting to steal intellectual property. In May, the Canadian government banned the use of Huawei equipment in this country's 5G networks. Ahead, the fate of militants in the Philippines who murdered 2 Canadians. The story of what happened to 2 Canadians 7 years ago in the Philippines is as sickening as it is tragic. John Ridsdale and Robert Hall were kidnapped and then killed. The businessmen were in the Philippines in September of 2015 when they were abducted by the militant group Abu Sayyaf and held hostage. In 2016, Hall and Ridsdale were beheaded. A demand for a multi-million-dollar ransom was not paid. At the end of that year, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his failure to secure their release was his greatest regret. Global News investigative journalist Stuart Bell recently went to the Philippines to investigate what happened to those responsible for the killings. And Stuart is with me now. Stuart, what did you discover?
Well, it turns out a major manhunt has been underway in the Philippines for the last couple of years. The Philippine police and army have been tracking down those responsible. And as a result, there have been really dozens of arrests, surrenders, and killings. And our investigation found that almost all the key members that were responsible for the killing and kidnapping of these 2 Canadians are either behind bars or dead. And among those caught was the beheader himself, a guy who goes by the name Ben Tattoo.
And where has this left Abu Sayyaf then, Stuart, which Canada and other countries have designated a terrorist organization?
Well, Abu Sayyaf has not been completely destroyed. There are still a few remnants around, but it's been so weakened to the point that it's really no longer able to do what it once did, which is to paralyze foreign governments by kidnapping their citizens.
Stuart, the Canadian government still does advise exercising a high degree of caution when visiting the Philippines because of crime and terrorism and kidnappings. What were your impressions being there?
Well, we're talking here about the southern Philippines, which are far from Manila. And frankly, people were surprised when I appeared on the island of Jolo in the south. They were surprised to see a foreigner visiting there. But Filipinos are really trying to turn the page on this part of their history. They're trying to change their reputation as a kidnapping haven and really rebuild their tourist economy in what is really a spectacular, stunning part of the world.
All right. Stuart Bell, who's recently returned from the Philippines, talking to us from Victoria tonight. Stuart, thanks. More than 60 people are dead after Myanmar's military launched airstrikes on a political gathering. The event was a celebration for the Kachin Independence Organization. That's a paramilitary group that's been fighting for the independence of one of Myanmar's ethnic minorities in the north. The organization says the event was a concert to commemorate the anniversary of its founding. The dead include performers and civilians. The attack comes 3 days before Southeast Asian foreign ministers are to hold a special meeting about the violence in Myanmar. Fantastic Felix next. The young Montrealer moving up the ranks in tennis. Becoming one of the best tennis players on the planet is no easy feat, and the hard work and determination of Felix AugerAliassime is paying off. The 22-year-old Canadian has been on a roll recently, playing tournaments in Europe. Mike Armstrong looks at how fast his star is rising and where he could be headed.
Whether or not that nickname sticks, it's earned. Canadian Felix AugerAliassime is wrapping up a month to remember, back-to-back tournament victories. Antwerp this past weekend, and Florence just 7 days earlier.
these kind of results inspire a nation.
The head of Tennis Canada is basically beaming. Michael Downey says AugerAliassime has every tool needed to compete and succeed. Speed, strength, and size. And at just 22 years old, the sky is the limit.
His potential is number one in the world in multiple Grand Slam championships. And he's probably more than capable with Dennis to lead this country to multiple Davis Cup titles. Like, Felix is that good.
Now, before any of that, the next few weeks are important. If things continue, AugerAliassime can qualify for the year-end ATP finals. Only the top 8 men over the calendar year qualify, with more than $20 million in prize money up for grabs.
I need some water. Some players, when they're on the cusp and have something like a carrot like that dangling, might be difficult for them to, fight off that pressure. But for Felix, it seems like it's been the opposite, that it's really propelled him to play his best over the course of these past 2 weeks.
Now, one thing that makes this year important for AugerAliassime is the monkey he got off his back. Coming into 2022, his career record in tournament finals was 0 for 8. In fact, tied for the worst record of all time.
And he didn't even win a set. He was 0-16 in sets.
Well, this was the day that changed. AugerAliassime won his first tournament in February. He celebrated with his father over FaceTime and a few tears. He's not quite a household name like Nadal or Djokovic, but he's very much now in the conversation. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Happy Diwali to all of you who are celebrating today. We leave you tonight with some of the Diwali celebrations in India. The 5-day Hindu Festival of Lights is celebrated by millions of people around the world. People in India are celebrating together for the first time in years now that public health restrictions have been lifted. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.